Hey, this is the pizza here, and this is going to be a full tour of Lion's Arch with my thoughts on the Guild Wars 2 beta, the beta weekends that I've experienced so far as a whole, and what I liked about it, what I thought could be improved, and pretty much just my thoughts on Guild Wars 2 as it stands right now. Which, the day I'm recording this, they actually just announced their official release date. They slated Guild Wars 2 for release on August 8th, I believe. No, August 28th. So it will be coming out rather soon. I believe that's 2 months time from now. Oh, and throughout this video, the gameplay will probably be somewhere around 15 to 20 FPS because I'm going to crank up the graphics to high just so you can actually see what Lion's Arch really looks like, as it was in the beta. And also, this was one of the first times I got to see the Sylvari character models inside the game, so I was sort of just checking out what the Sylvari look like. So let's see. Where do I start? I guess let's start with the classes. So for the beta, I pretty much played a warrior exclusively, and I did try out an elementalist a little bit, and I tried out the thief a little bit. And I have to say, all of the classes are very fun to play. From the small amounts I played of thief and elementalist and the large amounts I played of the warrior, I had just so much fun with the combat in all three of the classes. And here's where I crank up the graphics so you can see what it actually looks like. And like I said, I'll be getting low frame rate, but it's at the expense of the beautiful city of Lion's Arch, which takes quite a while to tour, as it is the main hub for the game. So, some people had fears that the combat would get very repetitive with there being such a limited number of skills available at any time. You have your 5 weapons-based skills and then your 5 skills in your slots, which your weapon-based skills you'll probably have fully unlocked by level 10 to 15 for whichever weapons you prefer. You'll probably have a few sets of them unlocked actually by that point. But your other slots, your 6 to 10, you unlock, or 6 to 0 I suppose, you unlock those fully at level 30, I believe is when the elite skill unlocks. So it does take a while to unlock the rest of your skills. But about the combat getting stale, it really doesn't, and I think it's because of the fact that there's no... I think I'd die here. But because of the fact that there's no mana you have to keep track of. There's very little you have to pay attention to other than the enemy and yourself. Or enemies in many cases. Oh yeah, I tried to I tried to dive, do a charge off the cliff, and I think I glitched out here. But there's not much you have to pay attention to. They really cut down on the UI, which is nice, because that makes them able to stick a lot more on the screen that actually affects the combat. So, taking a comparison to the most obvious thing at the moment, World of Warcraft, combat usually revolves around looking at the UI, looking at debuffs and buffs and little square icons around your health bar and the enemy's health bar, looking at threat meters, DPS meters, and maybe looking at the ground every now and again if the boss is going to lay down, because the only time you really ever don't need to look at the UI is when there's a boss laying down some sort of ground-based attack that you need to pay attention to, or like a don't stand in the fire moment. But other than that, you you just base so much of your combat on the UI. And in Guild Wars, it's pretty much the exact opposite. You'll always be paying attention to the enemy, because almost every single enemy in the game has some sort of attack that can seriously harm you. The river drakes, for example, when they come onto land, which they can be either in water or on land, and they have different attacks depending on what they're on. The vendors in town, by the way, are not finished, so whatever items they were selling were just placeholders. And I actually found a bit of a Easter egg about the NDA when I was traveling through the town. I'll mention it when I get to it. But like I was saying, the river drakes, when they're on land, they breathe a cone of fire in front of them, and they have a very obvious tell where they'll, just sort of lurch back and then breathe the fire in front of you. So you have plenty of time to dodge it, but you actually have to be watching the screen. You can't be watching the UI. You have to be paying attention to what's actually going on. And also in the latest beta, I noticed that you didn't even need to watch for buffs and debuffs. Because when I was playing and I got vulnerability inflicted on me, my character actually said, "I feel vulnerable." So I was like, oh, I got vulnerability on me. Well, that's nice. So they let you know through very subtle things that there's stuff going on that you might not notice if you weren't staring at the UI, which you shouldn't be. It's a nice way to immerse you into the world and makes you feel like you're actually doing something rather than just pressing 1 1 1 2 2 2 3 3 1 2 3 or whatever. And so rotations in this game are also very, I wouldn't say there is a set rotation for any class. I mean, with the greatsword, what I usually did is I would, I may get the names of the skills wrong, but I do whirlwind spin in, or whirling attack, or whatever it's called, that would lunge you forward into the enemy, and you'd be spinning around so you'd hit anyone you pass through. And then I'd usually try to end up on the opposite side of the enemy, so in case they tried to do any attack while I was spinning in, I would evade it. And this is the World v World center where you can go to all the World v World combat. And from that point, I would use my 100 blades so that I would do just tons of damage to the enemy while they may be trying to attack where I was. And then from that point, I didn't really have a plan. It just sort of depended on what happened during the fight. Some enemies would try to daze me, so I'd have to dodge out of the way. Sometimes I'd use my F1 skill and then use another flurry if I needed to go that far. Because my F1 gave me, I can't remember what the name of the stat was, but it gave you an extra chance to crit, I believe. God, I didn't get to play much the last beta weekend, so can't really remember. But I think it gave you an extra chance to crit, or just gave you more damage outright. So I'd pop that and then use my flurry again to get extra damage from my 100 blades, rather. I'd use that to get extra damage from the 100 blades. But yeah, there's not really any rotation, per se. I mean, sometimes I throw my greatsword at an enemy with my 4 skill to stop someone from running away, or maybe to go through I think that was the combo attack, actually, throwing your greatsword. So I think you can throw that through a combo field, such as, I never actually tried this, but I could probably lay down a fire field with my longbow, switch out to my greatsword, and then throw my greatsword through the fire field to have a flaming greatsword that slows and does pretty decent amounts of damage, and also boomerangs back, so it would do more fire damage. Should have tried that. I'll do that next beta weekend, which is the 20th to the 22nd of July. But yeah, the combat is very, very action-packed. It's a lot more active than any other MMO combat I've played personally. Now you see a lot of MMOs coming out that are doing more action-based combat, such as Terra, where you have to click every time to do skills and then press, I think it's spacebar in the middle of a combo to activate a special attack.
Well, that could have gone better.
So that's a little bit more interesting. But I think what separates Guild Wars as well as the combat, the fact that's sort of a mix of an action-based and hotkey, where you use hotkey skills but use them in an action scenario, is the way that questing works. So questing is just completely different in Guild Wars 2. If you don't already know this, it's a dynamic event system whereby you travel throughout the world and you'll be given tips as to where something might be happening. So maybe you'll just be walking down a road and someone will say, there's a bunch of... I don't want to use the centaurs thing because they always use that in all of their press releases. They always use the centaurs example. So I don't really want to use that. I'm going to use it anyway. So you'll be walking down the road and someone will be like, help, there's centaurs attacking my farm. And then you just go over to their farm and there's centaurs attacking their farm. And once you get there, maybe there's some hay bales on fire and you can pick up a bucket of water to put it out. You can just go out and kill the centaurs that are attacking. Maybe there's some... I don't know. Maybe there's some centaur siege weaponry outside of town that you can take out to help out. So there's always multiple objectives in a dynamic event. And once you're done, you get a reward, depending on how much you participated, and then you go on your merry way. There's no turn-in you have to do, you're done. You're done with the dynamic event. So that whole system also makes the game feel very much more active, because you're taking an active part in the way the quests play out. If you don't go there, maybe the farm gets destroyed, a possible vendor gets taken away from you, and then the centaurs move on to siege up the town nearby. And maybe you push them back, and you go to the centaur camp further outside of town, and you're given a task to kill 3 centaur leaders, which was actually an example from it was near the human city, where there was a centaur camp where you'd have to take out 3 leaders, and outside of the camp there were trebuchets, which made things very interesting when you were fighting outside of the camp, because trebuchets would target you when you were just, out in the forest trying to kill something, and a trebuchet from the centaur camp would get within range of you, and you'd see this red circle appear on the ground, and you just have to react to it right then and there, and you'd be like, okay, I'm in the middle of fighting this guy, but there's a trebuchet over there that's going to do a lot of damage if I don't move in the next 3 seconds. So that's another example of how the combat is just a lot more action-packed and more active. Over here I thought there'd be something to do at this farm, but there wasn't really anything to do. It is a nice looking farm though. Just a few dogs, some farm workers. It's a nice looking game, give it that. They do need to do some optimization though. From what I heard, they're only running it on 1 core of your processor. So they do need to fix that, which I'm sure they already know about that. I'm not really too concerned about the performance issues, because I'm fairly confident that those will get ironed out before release. In terms of balance, I can't really say anything for that, because I didn't partake in any PvP. What can I say? I like PvE. It's just, even in Guild Wars 1, which everyone loved it for the PvP, I gotta say I like the PvE in Guild Wars 1 too, just because it was a little bit more actiony than other MMOs, even in Guild Wars 1. So, what else is there to talk about? let's see. The crafting system, I didn't really get to experience too much. I did just collect a few crafting materials here and there, which was alright. The way that microtransactions will work in this game, it is a $60 game, so you will need to buy it for $60, but there are no monthly fees, and there are microtransactions. And from what I can tell, most of the microtransactions will give you stuff that you can acquire through just working in the game. And they're actually are implementing a what's the word I'm looking for? A ratio of in-game currency to the currency used for the microtransactions, which I believe is gems. So you will be able to directly transfer your gold in-game to gems that you can use for the item shop. What that rate is, I don't know, but that means you will be able to use any extra gold you've accumulated to buy something in the microtransaction shop, or you could just buy gems with real money and then turn that into gold. So let's see, now the personal story. So the personal story actually for my Char Warrior over here got very interesting near the end. I'm not sure how many people who are watching this video are watching my personal story videos, but the story actually does get interesting, and you do get to make some choices that seriously, and I do mean seriously, affect the outcome of the story. Like, they will completely change the path. And this is only up until level 20. That's when the personal story stopped in the open beta. And the another look at a Sylvari character model. And the content for the open beta stopped at around level 25-ish. So that's why I didn't play the second beta weekend a lot for that reason, and I wasn't feeling good. I was a little sick. And so I actually pretty much did most of the open beta content during the first weekend, because I played for about 24 hours during the first weekend. So, you know, maybe 8 hours a day or so. And this is a pretty cool part of Lion's Arch. There's the whole theme behind Lion's Arch now is it's sort of a pirate town, and pirates are sort of taken over, so there's actually this bridge made out of crashed pirate ships. So I thought that was pretty cool. It's a neat effect. You can even see it there on the map. So yeah, the personal story does get interesting. It starts out a little slow, with some rather difficult, actually, some rather difficult personal story quests. Assuming you're not, you know, going in at level 16 and being downgraded to level 4. Which I suppose I should mention that system, the whole side-kicking system, I believe is what they called it. Oh, and I think this is where I found the Easter egg, if you read the dialogue with one of the characters I have in here. This is where I find the Easter egg about the NDA. Yeah, in reference to these closed portals. Because I was wondering where all these portals were going to go. But they don't go anywhere yet.
You work for me.
So yes, the personal story actually is a little bit difficult. Some of the combat is genuinely challenging, and you have to pay attention during the personal story. I did not get to do the Ascalonian Catacombs dungeon, because that is a level 30 instance, and I did not take the time to get up to level 30. Kinda wish I would have. I don't know if they're going to wipe our characters for the next beta or not, but if they don't, maybe I'll try to do that. There's already so much Ascalonian Catacombs footage out there. I'm not really sure if I even, you know, want to record it. Probably just do it just to see what it's like, see what the difficulty's like, because I've heard and seen very different reactions to the difficulty. If anyone watches Total Biscuit and the Yogscast had so much difficulty with the Lovers boss, whereas Total Biscuit just sort of raffle stomped them. So I guess, you know, if I get a chance, I'll try that. Maybe I'll make a video just talking about it very briefly, but not a full video about the actual dungeon. So let me see, something that could be improved about the game. A very minor thing is I noticed when I used my right mouse, hold down the right mouse button to control the camera, as in almost every other third-person game. Sometimes the camera would just freak out. I'm not sure why, but sometimes it would just freak out and I'd completely lose track of what was going on, which really disoriented me in the middle of fights. It's a minor complaint. I'm sure it's something that's been brought up and possibly being fixed. I believe I put it in one of the bug reports within the beta. So if anyone else was getting that, they should be addressing that. And that's an interesting thing over there. What else? I'm having difficulty coming up with things that could be improved. Which is, I mean, that's sort of why I wanted to wait to do this, so I had time to think about it. I already talked about the performance issues, which I'm not worried about. There's that minor mouse issue. Maybe they could change the monster spawn rates a little bit in some areas when talking about how many players are actually in the area. Because sometimes I found myself alone in a lot of the areas that people just hadn't gotten around to exploring yet. A lot of the mid to high level human areas were fairly unpopulated for the most part. And while I was there, enemies were spawning at such a rate that I would be in the middle of a fight and 2 enemies would spawn around me and all of a sudden I'd be fighting 2 or 3 guys. So maybe that's something that they could address. Once again, not really a major complaint, but just a little something. I'm seriously just having difficulty coming up with things that could be improved. I'm sure more stuff will come up later on as I play the game more when it's in full release. But I guess we'll see. One thing that I found very fun was a jumping puzzle for a skill point. I'm not sure if it's the same one that the Total Biscuit or the Yogscast put out, because I did not watch those because I knew I was going to be playing in the open beta and I didn't want the puzzle spoiled for me. But it was a very fun and actually difficult jumping puzzle. We had a group of about 4 or 5 people who saw the skill point at the top of a tower. It was at the top of the tower on this wall, this broken wall, and we could not find stairs up that were near the tower. So we started to split up, and of course the entire area was infested with ghosts, so that didn't make things any easier. But we started to split up, and eventually I managed to find stairs way over on one side, and I was thinking, it seems a little far off, but looks like it's the only way up. And it turns out there's a rather long series of jumps you have to do to get to that skill point at the top of the tower. And there's some points along that path where if you screw up once, you fall and have to do the entire thing over again. But it was very fun, and we actually spent like a good 30-45 minutes looking and figuring out how to do this jumping puzzle to get to the skill point. So that was a fun time. Just some more variety to the game. I'm sure there'll be more creative ways of gaining skill points as you go throughout. And throughout my time playing the beta, my overall world completion, I think, went up to 14 or 15% of the entire world completed over the course of 24-ish hours. So it gives you an idea of how much content may or may not be in the game. I don't know how accurate that actually is in respect to how much content will be in the final game, because I don't know if that world completion was calculating all the stuff that, you know, everything that they're not showing us, or maybe just most of the stuff they're not showing us. So I think I'm pretty much done. Overall, it was a blast to play. Like I said, I played the warrior the most. Great sword, favorite weapon by far. I actually started to like the bow a little bit more than the rifle near the end, just because of how much fire there was. Maybe I should play an elementalist when full release comes about. As for the other classes, the thief and elementalist I got to play a little bit of. The combat felt just as active with those classes as it did with the warrior, so anyone who likes to play range, don't be worried about the combat getting boring at range just because the enemy might not be, you know, up in your face. You're still gonna have to move around and dodge attacks. It won't be stand in one place mashing hotkey. Unless you're really good and can like freeze the enemy in place for a long time. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. I think I'll just skip to the end of my tour of Lion's Arch. I didn't think I would get to show all of it in this video, but I did get to show most of it. Like I said, it's a massive city, so there's a lot to see. So I think I'll end it here with this diving platform and then cut to the end of the tour. And I'll see you next time.